Hi guys, welcome back to another video on business studies. Today we're going to talk about the various operational methods. You're going to talk about the differences between the operational methods and what are the problems when we change operational methods. So here are some examples of operational methods. You see a car manufacturer, you see a baker in a bakery, you also see a factory line, all right, of work, and you also see production of laptops and computers, right? Let's talk more in the next slide. Now, there are various types of operational methods. We have job production. Okay, we also have batch production, flow production, and mass customization. So let's differentiate them based on some of these areas to look at. Their main feature, what is required in this kind of production, what is the benefits, and what are the limitations, right? So for job production, normally is used to produce single one-off items, so which means it's quite unique by itself. For this to happen, you need to have highly skilled workforce, people who are very skilled in designing, creating something unique and different. Now, the advantages for this is it allows for specialist projects or jobs to be done with high added value, which means you could also price it very, very expensive, with a very high range of price for them. High levels of worker motivation because, well, if you are the only one working on that product, right? It creates a sense of achievement, a sense of very high level of added value that you have put into the production. Yeah, so that motivates people. The disadvantage is that with doing something like this, it definitely looks at high unit cost of production because in creating something unique and one off, you will need to purchase just one particular material for a single part of the product and so forth. So it's going to be you will not be able to enjoy economies of scale. It could be very time consuming, and you may need various other tools to support when needed. In batch production, you work with a group of identical products who go through the same production process together, right? So the requirements for this is labor and machines must be flexible to switch to making batches of other designs. So you produce a product, but you can produce it in batches. Batches basically means you have like 10 or 12 in a tray, yeah, for example. And it has to be labor and machine intensive sometimes because there will be machines used in batch production, but there'll also be a human being assisting, right? The advantages, you enjoy some economies of scale because batch production is normally smaller in volume. Yeah, faster production with lower unit cost than job production because you're producing more than one for batch production. Yeah, and there's some flexibility in the design of the product of each batch because if you're going to recreate one batch a bit differently from the next batch, you can somewhat do that. Yeah, the disadvantage is that you do have high levels of inventory at each production stage because you're producing in batches, not just one. Yeah, so you'll have inventory available. Unit cost likely to be higher than with flow production, which we're going to talk about next. So the cost will be slightly higher. Compared to, of course, it's much lower compared to job production, but higher compared to the next production method that we're going to learn, which is flow production. Now, for flow production, we are producing massively of a standardized products. Yeah, they are specialized, using specialized, expensive equipment, and normally the demand for this kind of products are high for something that everyone is going to use. So it's very standardized. The advantages is you because you produce in massive amounts, then you enjoy economies of scale or low unit cost, and there are high labor productivity and economies of scale. So mostly the combination of flow production involves high end machines and also human beings who work and to ensure that the machine is working fine, and they also play a part in the production process. In terms of disadvantages, it can be inflexible because it's difficult to and time consuming to switch from one type of product to another because it's all standardized, and it's expensive to set up because you're using a flow line machinery. So a flow line machinery is basically from the beginning of the product creation till the end, it goes through just a continuous flow, right, from one end to another. Now we have another method of production, which is mass customization, flow production of products with many standardized components but customized differences. So it is somewhat like flow, where you produce massively but with customized differences. Yeah, which means you can still customize certain parts of it. The requirements, it has you need to there's many common components, flexible and multi-skilled workers, and you also need flexible equipment to allow that variation or that customization to take place. So the advantages is that you get to combine low unit of cost with flexibility to meet customers' individual requirements. Yeah, and the disadvantages, of course, it is still expensive. Redesign may be needed to allow key components to switch to allow variety, so which means that you may need to do some tweak to the machine, which means that would be cost involved. Expensive, flexible capital equipment is needed. So from job production is for single one-off items. For batch production, a little bit larger than job production by batches, maybe 10, 12, 20 in a batch, right? Where they're almost identical, right? Flow production is mass production of standardized product, even larger than batch production, where it involves machines, right? Um, and then you have mass customization, which is a flow production method, but with customized differences. So which means that you're able to give more variety to your customers' needs. Okay, so now let's go back to the next slide. Go on to the next slide here, where you will see the examples of what we shown earlier in the first slide, right? So this car manufacturer here is this is an example of a job production method, Rolls Royce, right, where they produce one of different kinds of colors and designs for specific customer needs. Yeah, and then you have a bakery. A bakery produces in batches, and so you have a batch production method here. Then you have an example of a flow production here, as you can see. And the next one is mass customization, but you have different colors and designs for your Dell computers, for example. So this is an example of mass customization production. Okay. Now it's a wrap, but let's look at a simple, short case study here, just to give you some idea. So Sunburst Bakery supplies bread and cakes to leading supermarkets. It has a large factory that makes the entire range of products. No finished items are bought in from other bakers. Operations facilities are split into three main areas. Different production methods are used in these areas. The demand patterns for the best known Sunburst products are very different. Standard loaves and breads are bought by supermarkets every day, all year round. There is some variation in demand through the seasons, but very little. Large family sized cakes are mainly bought at weekends, whereas donuts and are most often bought midweek for children's lunch boxes. The business is famous for its handmade wedding cakes, each one to a different design. Managers plan to convert one section of the factory that uses batch production into flow production. Yeah. So for each of the products referred to the above, analyze an appropriate production method. So let's look at question one. Okay, so there are a couple of products here: standard loaves and bread rolls. Bread roll. Okay, I've got the spelling wrong here. Large family size cakes, handmade wedding cakes, and donuts. Right. So for all these four products, standard loaves and bread rolls, production flow production method is a suitable one, right? Because they're bought by supermarkets every day, all year round, and they're standard loaves. So you know, with flow production, they will be able to produce massively. Yeah, large family size cakes uses batch production, right? Where is large and basket mainly bought at weekends, whereas donut, yeah, so the volume is lesser, so they can produce by batches. All right. Handmade wedding cakes requires job production. Handmade wedding cakes, we know that it is each one to a different design, so it has to be a job production method. And donuts, which is a batch production methods, because donuts, where are you donuts? All right. Business, okay, large makers, standard loaves and bread rolls. Where are you, donut? Let me see. Yeah, donuts are also in smaller volumes and in batches. So there you have it. An appropriate production method. So I hope you noticed as I was explaining, I'm also giving you a reason why it is flow production and batch. So that's what you do when you need to analyze. You need to give more rather than just saying standard loaves and bread rolls flow production, right? It has to be a bit more than that. Okay. Now let's okay, before we move on, in choosing the operation methods, the following methods to be considered is also based on what are you need what are the other factors to look at. All right, how big is the market, how much money do you have, what are the other resources available, and also your customers demand. Okay, now for the second question, evaluate possible effects on Sunburst inventory levels and profit if it replaced all batch production into flow production method. So I broke into two parts here in answering these questions. First of all, to identify which production output will be affected, right? Because it will affect the inventory levels. Which one will be affected if they change from batch to flow? So because we got this recorded here for you already, for batch production, what will be affected is family cakes and donuts, and the volume for these sections is small because there's no customization. So if they were to change this into flow production method from batch to flow, the first, let's look at the direct impact first. It is an expensive equipment. They need to spend more to buy a bigger machine. They will definitely have more production. They'll be able to produce more than the current batches that they do, and this will bring down the unit cost. But it's also very suitable if they have high volume of demand or high volume, production for that matter. If there is a demand for it, and this may reduce dependency of the workers who's working in batches, and you have labor, manual workers, labor workers in the bakeries, bakers for the matter, they may not feel so happy with it because now the machine is doing everything else. Okay, so let's look at the inventory levels and the profit. In terms of inventory levels, you'll definitely have higher inventory levels from batch to flow because now you have a lot more to sell. You have stock. Okay, but for profit, that is a question because for batch production, family, right, demand, okay, there's large family size cakes mainly bought on weekends, and donuts often bought midweek, or so they're not consistent like the standard loaves and bread rolls where it's needed all year round. Yeah, so that may affect profit a little bit. They may have high levels of stock, which means they may not be able to sell as much, right? And we know with bread and doughs and cakes, they don't tend to last very long. If it's not sold almost immediately, maybe a 2 to 3 day lifespan, for example, that may be affected. So in answering this question, you've got to look at not just the points that I've written here, but you've got to analyze. Yeah, so that those are the additional things to put in when you talk about how it will impact the inventory levels and the profit when it is converted from batch production to flow production method. All right. Okay, that's the end of our slide for today. Thank you so much for listening in and watching in. Till my next video, have a wonderful, wonderful day.